he had an assignment where he had to connect like one word to another part of a sentence or something. And he would like literally like go like this and then connect it. And then the next one he'd go and connect it. And at first I was like, you can't do that. I can't keep track of what it is you're doing. And then I thought, I couldn't have done that with 30 kids in the classroom, but I sure as heck can do that with one kid. And so I would just watch him do the answer. I'm like, yep, that's right. That's right. That's right. He knows what he's doing and he's having fun while doing it. Now, that's not to say that you have to allow that kind of, not behavior, but that kind of choice on their part. Like, I was like, fine, if that's how you're going to have fun doing this, then do it. I know that you're learning it. And, if you keep doing that in college, people might laugh at you, but whatever, you do you. But my point being is like, you know, what you worry about when they're 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, or even what you worry about when they're doing it at 11, you know, a lot of it's just maturity and age, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing at that age. And they will, mature out of that and grow out of it. And, I doubt he's going to do that when he gets to college, or he'll do it once and then somebody will look at him funny and he won't do it again, so not
Yeah,
creating weird people.
no. And who's to say that the way we did it was the right way? I mean, I look back at my education. I did public, I did private, and I homeschooled. And I could tell you the pros and cons and the things that were great in each of those and the things that were horrible in each of those. And so, from socialization, I had a horrible experience in junior high at a private school for socialization. So if you want to mark that as like the reason you shouldn't homeschool, I could talk an hour as to why homeschool was the best choice for me in that moment. And then, so with the things that worked me up over the years, and honestly still work me up with teenage daughters, I have to stop and just ask myself, is this about me? Is this about my expectation? Is this about what I think they should be doing or how I think it should be done? Or like your example, does it really matter? Like, why do we have to put emphasis on things that don't matter? But homeschooling is a parent magnification of
Yeah.
all your idiosyncrasies. And you're going to have to be willing to take an honest look at, and I've said this again, I'll continue to say it because I think it really does make a difference between a thriving homeschool experience and a mediocre homeschool experience is like, are you willing to get out of your own way?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I referenced my first year of homeschooling. I was so excited to do it. And, David was really eager to learn. So, man, I had our basement set up like a classroom, just like my classroom before, with us, which we actually loved. Like, he loved what we had established with that. But the schedule I had for him was like basically the schedule I'd used for my first graders in school. And very quickly learned that that was a ridiculous idea. I don't know where I thought, I was getting that from, that was going to make sense. And it was a disaster. And we adjusted, but I didn't just quite as quickly as I probably should have. But even when you really feel like you know best, stop and reassess. Like, do that constantly. Like, you need to be reassessing your children, whether you give them, red marks and grades is one thing, but you need to be assessing their learning all the time, because all this that you're trying to teach them, you need to assess whether they're learning it or not. And you have to do that for yourself. You need to assess what you're doing all the time. And the reason for assessment is to see if it's working and adjust if needed. And that goes for your kids learning, and you've got to constantly just like and it's not judging yourself. It's not that. It's just like, oh, did that work? Did that not work? Oh, that didn't work. We're going a different direction. And be wary of what you see on Facebook in terms of like what everybody else is doing, especially for me, getting to the high school years, it was like stress. Like, that's was like his 8th grade year when thinking about high school, and like knowing there's only this many years left. And like looking what everybody else was doing, like dual enrollment in 8th grade and taking the pre-ACT when you're in 7th grade and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, oh, and you start comparing yourself. I'd never been one to compare until then. And that was really, that was detrimental to me and to like what we did that year, because I was like, just constantly like, am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it? And I was just judging what we were doing wrong. And I know I took a lot of that out on, him as well. Like I made him stop sitting on top of his desk to do his work. I'm kidding. He stopped long before that. But just like be aware, like not to compare yourself. Use some benchmarks, but find benchmarks that you believe in and that you have confidence in. And not the random person on Facebook who tells you that you're doing it wrong. Like just find something that gives you a sense of peace that you are doing, that you're on the right track, and keep reassessing it. But, just be aware of homeschooling needs to look the way it needs to look for you. And don't forget, that means it'll look different for somebody else. So what they're doing is not what you need to do unless you match it perfectly, and, great. But just be aware of that, because it is so easy to lose your confidence when you start comparing yourself to what others are doing. So,
yeah, I think growth is really important. So are they growing? Is there progression? Then to me, that's progress, right? I don't care what another 14-year-old girl is doing maybe in the same class. Like, I just don't care. I just want to know that my daughter is learning and that she's growing and there's progress, because that is the most important. Katie, I think that's something that some listeners may be asking, and the burning question of maybe want to know, as a homeschool mom to one, what did you do intentionally to create community for your son?
that's a great question. And I will tell you, up until 8th grade, I literally took every opportunity I could to go out and do something with David. I created a co-op so that there was I live in a small community, but I created a co-op with a friend. And so we had a co-op that we met once a week, super involved with, made all of his friends there, youth group. We also did a book club, which was actually our favorite thing. Some of the same kids, but not always the same kids. We did rec center stuff. We did sports. We did like literally, because I was worried that I needed to, because when you have an only child and it's only child who's homeschooled, all socialization is going to be outside the house, or you have to bring it into your house, but it's not built in. It's just not. And so I always laugh when homeschoolers get offended at the socialization question, but it's a legit question. It's a legit concern for homeschooling an only child. It really is. I mean, there's just no two ways around it. You cannot not create those social situations for your kid. So we did everything that was open to us. That's one of the mistakes I will say I made. Now, when I got to like the middle school years, I could look back and be like, that was probably a bit much. We probably should have spent more time, doing math or whatever it was. But it was like, that was probably a bit much. And I felt this pressure, this internal pressure to make sure that I didn't create an obviously unsocialized homeschooler. Because, we don't want that exactly. So, but there are so many, I live in a small town. The opportunities are out there, whether it's a rec center class when they're, 5 years old, or the baseball league, there's so many different opportunities, but you definitely have to go out and do those things. An only child who's homeschooled doesn't have to take turns. He doesn't have to share. He doesn't have to, I had a friend who had 5 kids, and she was always like, why do you make David what he likes for lunch every day? And I'm like, because why wouldn't I? You know what I mean? Like, why would I purposely create a meal he doesn't want to eat? I get it. When you have 5 kids, not everyone's going to want to eat the same day, but it's like, why would I like purposely do that? But Janna, you've been out to a restaurant with him at a restaurant he didn't want to go to. He survived. He was perfectly fine. You know what I mean? It's like, so anyway, an only child at home all day long definitely creates different challenges. The other thing too is attention. When you're done homeschooling for the day, or you're done doing lessons for the day, or whatever it is you're doing, you can't necessarily just be like, okay, go off on your own now. Mommy's going to go do this. They still want to do stuff with you because you're the only one. So it's either like technology or it's whatever you're doing with mom. So yeah, you definitely have to look for those social opportunities though, but they're out. I believe that they're out there. I think that, and if they're not, you can create something, even if it's just a book club with 4 other kids, and they don't have to all be the same age, or for 1 year or 2 years, we just did science with his best friend. Like his mom and I used the same book, and we just did science. And once a week we met and did the science experiment for the week. And so it's like just stuff like that. You have to kind of think outside the box, but you definitely have to, you can't ignore socialization with an only child who's homeschooled. It's not an option. So you gotta find those things or create them.
I would imagine it becomes extra challenging when your only child is not an extrovert.
Yeah. David is not an extrovert, except when he needs to be. He's definitely like a one-on-one kind of person or a small group kind of person. Like he has one best friend who actually happens to be an only child who was homeschooled. So that's the only thing they have in common, though they are opposites in everything else, but they have a phenomenal relationship because they really understand, one another's lives. But like he still doesn't even like to, like he can drive now, but he doesn't like to like go to the store and get something for us. He's like, oh, people, like but I mean, you've met him. He's so easy to be around, but only the people he wants to be around, I guess. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think sometimes people forget personalities when they hear homeschool, right? They just want to lump it all together.
Right.
But we still have children with individual personalities, and some are extroverted and some are not. I know that in my household, the one child that will love to go do things for us wants to bring someone else with her to do them. So she's the first one that will go to the store, but she like goes through the whole house. Who wants to go to the store with me? Who wants to go to the store with me? Right. So like, I mean, it's so interesting because you can have socialization problems with introverts in a public school too. Right.
Absolutely.
It's really knowing your child, knowing their limits, knowing what they're comfortable with. I have one that she's one of my twins. And I said, we just knew you couldn't have been an only child. Like it wasn't meant to be from the beginning, which is why you have your yang to your yin for sure. But it's like that push and pull. Like you have to know your kids of when you sign them up for something, when to insist that they finish and not quit, but also to allow them to quit when it's too much for them emotionally. And so I really encourage parents that whether there's 18 people in your house or 3 people in your house, right? It's knowing your own child and being intuitive to their needs, not in a catering or pandering kind of way, but it can get complicated.
Absolutely. We had last year. Yeah, it was last year. I signed David up for a live class. It was a subject he needed. I spent a lot of time researching. It ended up being the worst class ever for him. He was miserable from the very beginning. As I said, he takes his studies really seriously, but for a variety of reasons, the class was a disaster for him. And he's very open in communicating with us. And so he told us from the process. And at first we were like, well, you just paid a lot of money. You're doing it, And so we kept pushing. I mean, we listened and we tried to like help him find ways to navigate it and make it work. But it just got worse and worse. And about mid-December, we're like, okay, we're letting it go because it was stressful to him. Like he was like, literally the entire time he was in class, like his stomach was upset and he was just like, he was not learning because it was such a horrible environment. And we're like, all right, the money's out the window. I mean, not to make light of money, but like money's out the window. We will find something else. Just we're moving on. And I mean, it took me a while to get there. My husband got there before I did. But that's what you have to do. It's like, it's not a failure. And this is I have a side note I want to add in a minute, but like, that doesn't need to be considered a failure. It was just like, that didn't work. And, thank God it wasn't public school where we couldn't have made the change. You know what I mean? It's like, why are we homeschooling him if we cannot make things work? And it wasn't that he wasn't doing the work. It just was not a good fit. And on that note, don't be afraid. Like if you do outsource something, or if you buy a curriculum, like whatever, don't be afraid to, what I basically say is like, fire the person. Because like at first my big thing was like, well, we can't quit, can't be a quitter, can't quit, can't quit, quit, quit. And then I'm like, wait a minute, we hired this person, paid a lot of money to do this for us. It's not working. We're not quitting. We're firing you. You know what I mean? I mean, we didn't say that to him, this person necessarily, but it was like, that's what it was. It was like, you're working for us. We're not doing you a favor. You're working for us. We're not quitting. We're firing you. This is not working. We're going to replace you with something else. And like, once I realized that, I was like, oh, that's a relief. Now, granted, you can't, buy 12 math curricula every year. Financially, that's crazy. It would also create a lot of math gaps, just, an aside. But if it's not working, fire that book, or fire the company, or fire that person, or whatever, and replace it with something else that works. And just like constantly be reassessing. Obviously, the fewer changes you have to make, especially mid-year, the better. But don't be afraid to make those if you need to. And again, personalize it for each child if possible, and pay attention, because as a classroom teacher, we always like to say we differentiated for kids. Okay, we did to a degree. You cannot do that with 30 kids. You can't. I mean, it's impossible. But you can do that with 1 or 2 or 3, or I mean, the biggest family I know is 7. You can differentiate for 7 kids. You really can. Financially, that might be, more complicated, obviously, but like you can differentiate that learning. So do it. Otherwise, they might as well be in a classroom with 30 kids all doing the same thing.
Yeah. I think that's an important point for parents to hear, that you are in charge. And if it's not working, it says less about your child sometimes and
Yes.
more about the style. And it's okay. It really is okay. Katie, I know that you have put a lot of time and effort into your unit studies that you've created. And I would love for you just to quickly tell our audience where they can find the things that you have done originally for David, but now you are gracing the rest of us with the ability to get those things.
Yeah. And I'll briefly tell you why. So I'm not going to remember the year, but he was little and it was an election. And I wanted to teach him about the election. And I could not find, it was a presidential election, I should say. I could not find something that I wanted to use that seemed neutral and like was at his level and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like looking and I was like, oh, I don't care if I have to pay for it. Like I can't find anything. Bookshark probably has something, but I don't know if they had it years ago.
We do actually. We do have an elections lap book.
Yeah, good. Yeah, but this was a long time ago. And so I created something, and then that introduced me to like Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all these things out here. So that's what started it. So, and I would always like create things for co-ops and stuff because I liked them to be exactly what I wanted to teach or whatever. So I have a lot of things like that. Like I just made a new Veterans Day pack and I learned a lot. Like I was like, I didn't realize that about Veterans Day. Like there's not that you have to understand Veterans Day, but if you want to learn about it, I've got something, there's obviously other things out there, but I think it's important for our kids to understand these current events or these holidays that we're always talking about, things that are on the news. So I do a lot of that kind of stuff, and you can find it at the wolfpackden.com. And I don't know if we can put a link in there or something like that, but
we definitely
and I
will.
love, and of course, obviously I don't do it for David anymore, but I do make him proofread stuff. Like he still has to work for it, but
that's right. Well, and there's parents like myself who have no desire at all to create anything original. I just don't, I don't have it. And I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with that. I'm like, listen, I have no desire, but I know other people do. So let's find those people so that I can use my energy in different ways. And that's typically getting us lost on a hiking trail. So, I mean, memories, memories. Katie's been lost with me on a hiking trail. Katie, before we go, I would love for you to share a homeschool hack that has worked for your family that might encourage some of our listeners today.
Sure. Now, I will say I wish I had used this homeschool hack a lot earlier than I did, but my homeschool hack would definitely be outsource subjects or even part of a subject when needed, and when I say when needed, that means when you need it or when your kid needs it or both. But outsource, like there are experts out there, somebody that can just make it more fun, but can make it, explain something better, that has the joy behind it, that they want to like give it to you, like just outsource, find people out there to do little parts of your homeschooling for you. I firmly believe that homeschooling means you homeschool your way. And if that means that, you pay someone to do science, great. If you pay someone to do math, fabulous. Or if you do it all yourself, but like, don't be afraid to outsource. I wish I had outsourced. I especially wish I'd outsourced math sooner. So definitely like, know that that's an option out there, and don't listen to anybody. This is my biggest hack, is don't listen to anybody who tells you you're not homeschooling the right way. Homeschooling, well, it's the name of your podcast. Homeschooling, it's your way. Like whatever that looks like, you get to design that, and that is yours. And so don't listen to anybody who's telling you you're not doing it the right way. That's my biggest homeschool hack, I guess. Don't listen to the people.
Don't listen to us. Don't listen to
exactly.
you. We don't know what we're doing. Find us back in 10 years.
For me now.
That's right. That's right. I'll speak personally. I don't know what I'm doing, but what I do enjoy. So Katie, I have really enjoyed this time with you. We will make sure to put all of the links to get your curricula that you've created. You have free resources on your site. So we'll make sure that our listeners can get a hold of that information. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I hope that we can get David on at some point to kind of follow up and get his perspective on his homeschool situation, now that we've put you under the magnifying glass. Yeah,
that would be an interesting. Have you had their homes? I know you had your girls, right?
Mm-hmm. I have.
It would be interesting to have someone, especially like either the perspective of an only child or from like going from the very beginning to the very end, like,
Yeah. So we'll see if we can make that happen. I have a special little pull with David. So maybe we can.
Do. I bet you could do it, Janna. You could do it before I could do it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you guys for being with us. Until next time. Bye-bye. Yay. All right.